Today we'll look at similarities and differences in living things. Some things are due to inheritance, others to other factors. So again, similarities and differences in living things. We're doing this as we prepare for our field trip to Benton College this Thursday to participate in their evolutionary biology lab, which we'll talk about in class. All right, biological similarity. Talk about two main groups, what we call homology, that is when traits are inherited from a common ancestor. An analogy, when things are similar because they serve a similar purpose. We'll get to that one later on. Let's look at homology first. Remember, homology means two organisms have a similar trait or structure because they inherited it from a common ancestor. So all animals, tetrapods, 4 limbs, have homologous limbs. We infer this based on, we see the same pattern of bones over and over again. So whether we're looking at a whale, a bird, a lizard, or a human, we see the same pattern of humerus, radius, ulna, and the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. So across the entire animal kingdom, we see the same basic pattern over and over again, which is really curious and led scientists infer that there are so many more efficient ways to walk and move and fly and swim around. Why are we seeing the same pattern over and over again across all the animal species? This is kind of how one way to envision it. If we look at, when was our last common ancestor? Humans and whales, okay, very similar. Lizards, we still have the same pattern of bones. Even birds with their highly specialized forelimbs for flight follow the same humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. So this is a very simple look at evolutionary tree, in part based on the first ancestor, common ancestor of all animals, which was an ancestor to the amphibians, had this basic structure. We see this not just in animals, but in plants. So oaks and ginkgos, which are very distantly related, have the same basic structure of leaves. They're different in how they attach, but their leaves follow the same function and generally have very similar structures. Interesting fact about ginkgos, they don't exist in the wild anymore. Ginkgo trees that we see exist because they've been cultivated by humans for thousands of years, particularly in the Far East. But interesting case in point of how we humans can affect different other populations. We see this in the insect world as well, where we see dragonflies and butterflies both have similar wing structures because they inherited them from an ancient flying insect. They have very different flight patterns, though. They fly completely different mechanisms. Odonates, dragonflies, actually flex their thorax to cause the wings to fly, whereas butterflies, move like a shoulder joint, more like how a bird would fly. Also, I'm just curiously, odonates, dragonflies, move their wings separately. The front wings operate independent of the back wings, whereas in butterflies and most four-winged insects, the wings move in sync with each other. This helps with aerodynamics, but it's interesting aside how even a homologous structure, like wings, which seems to do the same function, can be very, very different from each other. What about these? So we're going to look at an elephant and a beaver. Are these homologous? I mean, an elephant uses their teeth to dig, to peel bark from trees, and for fighting. Yes, elephants do fight. Kind of scary when something that large starts fighting. But what about a beaver? They use their teeth for chewing through tree trunks, for hauling wood and reeds around. So are these homologous or are these analogous? Let's think it through. All mammals have teeth, so teeth come from a common ancestor. Even baleen whales have teeth, they just don't develop very much. Beavers and elephants are both mammals. They have fur. They bear live young. They nurse their young. Right? Homologous structures are inherited from a common ancestor. Therefore, beaver teeth and elephant teeth are homologous, even though they're used in very different manners. So let's look at analogous structures. So these are structures that look similar or serve similar functions, but aren't. Or, excuse me, but are not from a common ancestor. So what about cephalopods? Those are the octopus in particular. Do we share a common ancestor, or are limbs as tetrapods analogous to a cephalopod? Well, let's look at the evolutionary tree. So cephalopods are part of the mollusk family, and they're very, very distantly related to vertebrates. You can tell that because look how far away our last common point of departure from each other was back here, when the animals first started to diverge, probably after the Cambrian explosion of life. So we see that limbs in both these cases happen independently of each other and millions of years apart. This means they're analogous structures. They serve similar functions. They help us move around and manipulate our environment, but they evolved after a point of common ancestry. So this is what we mean by analogous structure. We use them for similar things, but we don't inherit them from a common ancestor. It's important to remember that similarity is not the same as homology. We can't look and say, hey, octopuses, sea stars, all insects, lizards, birds, humans, and whales all have limbs. Therefore, they're all the same. They're all inherited from a common ancestor. And that's not the case, because even when we look at how these limbs are structured, are very different than how tetrapod limbs are structured. Interesting question to think about. Are octopus and sea stars, are they homologous structures? Well, let's go back and look. Here we go. So here are echinoderms, sea stars. Here are the mollusks. Are their limbs homologous? No, they're not, because cephalopods evolved their limbs over here well after their division from echinoderms. And also notice that echinoderms and vertebrates share a fairly recent common ancestor. But our limbs show in the fossil record well after echinoderms and vertebrates split off from each other. So even vertebrates and echinoderms, though both have limbs, don't have the same kind of limbs. They're analogous structures, not homologs. I bring that up because similarity is not the same as homology. All right, let's look at another example from mammals and marsupials. It's not always easy to tell. Here we have Thylacus similis. Say that 3 times fast. Say it 1 time fast if you can. This was a marsupial, kind of like a Tasmanian tiger, but saber-toothed. And then we have Smilodon, which was a placental mammal, saber-toothed cat. Let's look back at the evolutionary tree to see, are saber teeth homologous or analogous structures? So we're looking at just marsupials and placentals. We see that the saber teeth pop up at 2 different times. See how marsupials had branched away from the placentals, and then Smilodon had branched from other placentals, and then Smilodon developed saber teeth. Likewise, on the marsupial end of things, Thylacus similis branched off from other marsupials and developed saber teeth. So looking at this kind of fossil record, we can infer that saber teeth developed at 2 different points in 2 different branches of placentals and marsupials. So these are analogous structures, even though they look pretty gosh darn similar. They're both very large incisors. They're analogous structures because this trait appeared well after the last point of common ancestry. We will look briefly in class at other analogous structures, namely with dolphins and sharks, but I don't want to get into that now because this has gone on just about long enough. All right, so in brief, analogy is when an apparently similar trait pops up after the point of common ancestry. Whereas homology, in this case, with mammals, all placentals, we bear alive young, we have fur, and we nurse our young. Those are all homologous traits. All mammals inherited those from the same common ancestor back here. Marsupials have fur. They do provide milk-like substance for their young, but not quite the same. I'm thinking of the monotremes in particular, which are another branch. But they have fur. They bear alive young. So those are homologous traits for all of them, for all of us. All right. I hope I've thoroughly confused you on the trait. I'm going to stop talking to you. It is freezing cold in my classroom. I hope the boilers are on for us before we start class this week. All right, so homology and analogy. I hope you enjoyed your weekend, and I will see you in class.